This is a true horrifying story that took place in Zarqa, Jordan. Muhammad, a 19-year-old Jordanian, back in 2011, he was hanging around the neighborhood with his friends. A 40-year-old looking man pulls up in his car right next to where they're sitting. He looks out the car, points to Muhammad, and asks him to come. Muhammad at 19 was a tall and muscular young man. So he goes to him, and the man seemed very friendly. They chit-chat for around 10 minutes. Now put in mind, that man is a stranger. He asks Muhammad, "Hop in my car, let's go to my place. I'll show you my house." Muhammad was shocked and creeped out. He thought that man may have been interested in a young muscular man like himself. But he also felt confident, because he knew if things went wrong in that man's house, he could take him down. Muhammad looks at the back of the car and he noticed a black dog. Muhammad loves dogs so much, he said, "You have a dog?" And the man replied, "I have a lot more dogs at my house." They hop in and they reach the man's house. And Muhammad says, "I saw the most unusual antiques I have ever seen." He had a cross statue right next to an Islamic one. He had a maid that looked very unusual and she did not speak a word. It was so strange. The same dog that was in the car was on the couch, just chilling there. He immediately knew what kind of man he was. He faked a phone call and he told the man that he has a family emergency and he dipped. Muhammad went back home and saw his mom. He told her everything and she did not take it easy. She was so furious that this happened to her son. She grabbed a small bottle of water and she forced Muhammad to take her back to that same house. They reach outside the gates and she asks Muhammad to open the door. At this point, it's pretty much impossible to control a mother that's furious about her children being in danger. She walks in, she sees the dog and the maid. She sprays the water she had in the man's house. The dog and the maid vanish. The old man starts screaming his lungs out. "Please, please, I will not come anywhere close to your son again. Please stop." She leaves with Muhammad, and in the car she tells him, "That man is a sahir, a black magician. The black dog is a ashiq of yours. She's been wanting you for a while. She couldn't come inside the house because our house is blessed. The black dog was a jinn and the maid was a jinn. The only way she could come to you is through that sahir." Muhammad is 30 years old today. He lived in Europe, he lived in Jordan, he lived in Dubai, and in every country he's been to, he still sees that same black dog watching him from a distance. This is a true horrifying story which covers more about the Dajjal. For those who don't know who the Dajjal is, please refer to part 35 for a detailed explanation. A summary of part 35: Dajjal is a human being. He either lived for more than 1,000 years or he will be born one day. In other religions, he is known as the Antichrist, the false Messiah. The Dajjal is a master deceiver. He will make people think he's God. In Judaism, the false Messiah that is yet to come is believed to be the real Christ. Most of mankind will be deceived thinking he is God. Most of mankind will be his followers. They are unbeatable. In many ahadiths, the Prophet said that the Dajjal will have supernatural abilities. But back then, they might have been supernatural. But with today's technology, these abilities are very doable. In one narration, it's said that the Dajjal will cloud up the sky and pour rain. Another one says the Dajjal will be riding on something that flies. These narrations were said 1,400 years ago. Both of these abilities with modern technology are possible. So we don't really know if the Dajjal has legitimate power or if he'll be using modern technology to deceive people. When the Dajjal is out, he will force people to worship him. And if you refuse, your money, your income, and your food will be taken. But how can this be? How can the Dajjal empty my bank account? You're thinking, no one has access to our money, right? But this is the thing. There is a new global integration that was discussed among political leaders and big firms. A global blockchain integration was announced, a new invention for money. All the money sometime in the future will be purely digital. No more banknotes, no more cash. Every single transaction will be traced. And all governments will use the same integrated system that has access over everyone's money. Now, this technology may sound good, but it also may be very bad. Because with a click of a button, boom, all your money can be taken away. This is far beyond creepy, because when the Prophet spoke about this ability, where the Dajjal can make your money vanish, the Sahabas couldn't comprehend it. But thinking about it now, while we are in the future, it all makes sense. The Dajjal is very, very close. All the major signs of his arrival have happened. The technological abilities, the fasad, the new world order. He is coming, and only one person can save us. This is a true horrifying story, part 43. I know I've been gone for a few days, but I came to Germany for a quick holiday. This is more on the Bermuda Triangle, one of the strangest, most horrifying places on earth. In part 39, I spoke about how the throne of Iblis may be on the Bermuda Triangle. Let's forget about Iblis now. The news have stated that 50 ships and 20 airplanes have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. But how is it defined by scientists? Some scientists have said that it is common for big natural storms to hit that side of the ocean. Therefore, the ships and the planes were destroyed from these storms. And others say that there might be a magnetic force under the water which may attract many compounds. A pilot by the name Bruce Gernon flew over the Bermuda Triangle on December 1970. Bruce was flying through a big cloud, and the instruments in the plane stopped functioning properly. 30 minutes later, Bruce flew through another cloud, and he realized that this cloud was the same cloud he went through 30 minutes ago. The clouds started to tunnel around the plane, and then minutes later, he made it through. But not just made it through. He arrived at his destination being 2 hours early. The time span above the triangle was supposed to be a flight of 2 hours, but apparently it took this pilot 2 minutes to cross over. Now in Islam, in a couple of ahadith sahihah, the Prophet said that Iblis, who is known as Lucifer, is on water. His throne is on water. There's also another recording of a pilot that also flew over the triangle, and before this pilot disappeared, he tried explaining what he was seeing, but it was too late. On the radio, he said that he was flying through black smoke. He couldn't see anything. But when he was able to see, he saw a lot of strange things that are not humane. If you somehow come close to the throne of Iblis, you will probably not survive. No one can 100% guarantee that the Bermuda Triangle is the throne of Iblis. But strangely, this part of the ocean has taken many lives. And let's not forget this. Many of you might not know this. We have explored only less than 5% of the whole ocean. It is a world way bigger than ours, and I can confirm that Iblis lives somewhere in that world. This is a true horrifying story of the cab driver in Jordan. This story took place around 1991 or 1992. Yusuf, a Jordanian cab driver, was driving around an old village at night. He was on his way home, about to end his shift. On his way, he sees a young 19-20-year-old girl that was struggling to get a ride. He pulled up next to her, and she seemed very shocked that he saw her and tried to help out. She hops in the car and she asks him to take her home. She leads the way and they finally reach. She thanked him and she hopped out the car. She gets closer to her house and she just stares at it. He noticed what she was doing, so he rolls down the window and he shouts, "Hey, get inside your house." She turns her head, smiles at him, and starts walking towards her door. Yusuf's house was around a 40-minute drive from that area. He starts driving back home, and 30 minutes in through the drive, he looks at the back of the car and he notices a handbag. The girl that hopped in forgot her bag. He rolls his eyes and turns around, because the drive back to her house is going to take another 30 minutes. He reaches the same house. It was very dark. There were no lights. He knocks on the door. He rings the bell. The bell does not work. He gives up and he decides to come back in daylight. Yusuf wakes up the next morning and immediately goes to this girl's house with her handbag. He knocks and knocks for several minutes. Nobody answers the door. A bunch of guys walk past him and start laughing at him. He turns around and asks about what's going on. They tell him, "You're knocking on a house that's been empty and abandoned for 15 years. Yusuf says, "It can't be. I dropped a girl here last night and she forgot this handbag." They ask Yusuf to describe how she looks like, and he did. The guys started to look extremely uncomfortable. They told him that the girl he described was an actual resident in this house. This girl and her whole family died many years ago in an unexplainable death. And the handbag that you're carrying right now is hers. A stolen, lost handbag. It contained all her items, her documents, her papers. Her relatives and the authorities were looking for this handbag for many, many years. But who was the girl that hopped in the car? This is a true horrifying story, part 45. The Exorcist, a film that is based on a true story. Back then, it was rated as the scariest movie that has ever been screened. The story of this movie is based on a powerful jinn that possessed a little girl, and the local priests were not able to cure the girl. A few characters were killed by the demon in the film, and eventually they got help from experts that had to travel to perform an exorcism on the girl. So that's the story of the movie. But what were the horrifying incidents that happened behind the scenes? The director, William Friedkin, saw a pigeon fly into the circuit box. The entire set was destroyed and burned down. Many of the actors were injured during scenes, and they had to perform a blessing every single day to ensure safety on everyone on set. They knew that they were not supposed to turn this girl's story into a movie, but they did anyways. There were reports by the Washington Post in early 1974 of many heart attacks around the world, spiking whenever the film premiered. And there were lightning bolts targeting a screening in Italy, in an attempt by who knows what to stop the movie from screening. All the characters that lost their lives in the movie have lost their lives in real life. This movie has killed many of its cast and staff associated behind its production. Among them are two actors, Jack McGowan and Vasiliki Maliaros. They both died before the film was released. Not only 9 staff members have died during the production, but more than 10 relatives of other producers have died before and after the movie was released. But why though? Looking at it from an Islamic perspective, why all these deaths? Jinns don't like their stories to be told. Jinns usually keep what they know to themselves. That is why many of the jinn storytellers can talk online to an extent and cannot go beyond. If we talk about research only jinns and black magicians know about, we may get hurt. I'm not saying that jinns have more knowledge than us, but they know things that we do not know. And the knowledge that comes from jinns always costs a price. The jinns were not happy that their story was told. The producers of this movie were not permitted to tell their story, and therefore sets were burned down, the actors got injured, and people's lives were taken. This is a true horrifying story of a man who read the book Shams al-Ma'arif. For those who don't know what this book is, please refer to part 25. It is the second pinned video on my page. Shams al-Ma'arif is one of the world's most dangerous books. It carries one of the most dangerous rituals of summoning demons. Stay away from this book if you ever see it. This story took place in Egypt about 2 years ago. I don't know much about this book, but after I heard the story, I discovered some extra information of what this book contains. There are a couple of pages, around 4 or 5 pages inside this book, somewhere in the middle. They contain names of jinns. Part of the ritual is reading all these names, and one of the jinns on these pages will be summoned. A man in Egypt got this book from an old friend. His friend warned him many times about reading the book, but he insisted. Before the owner gave him the book, he ripped out these 4 or 5 pages that contain the names of the jinns. Because out of all rituals in the book, that one specifically is the most dangerous one. He rips the pages out and hands him the book. That friend takes the book back home and starts reading it. As he reads the book, strange things would happen. He would hear knocks inside his house. Small things would light up on fire, and the tap water would run in the toilets. He knew such things would happen. He ignored everything and continues reading the book. All of a sudden, someone outside rings the doorbell. His whole body froze from fear. He opens the door and sees a short, old man. He looked very unusual. His feet were abnormally big. The skin on his face seemed like it was rubber, and his hands were as dry as a rock. The old man looks at him and says, "Stop reading the book." And then he left. Ever since that day, wherever this guy goes, he would see that old man everywhere. At the supermarket, at the gas stations, outside mosques, in his neighborhood. This guy decided to give the book back to his friend. When he gave the book back to the real owner, the owner immediately turns to the pages that he ripped out before handing him the book. And he witnessed something terrifying. The pages that were ripped out were stitched back inside the book. He quickly asked him if he reached and read those pages. He said, yes. Ever since I read this chapter, this old man has been following me everywhere. This is a true horrifying story of a person who visited Al-Qasimi Palace in Ras Al Khaimah, the United Arab Emirates. This story happened in 2004. Al-Qasimi Palace is known to be the most haunted place in the UAE. I already covered a story about this palace in my Horrifying Stories Part 4. Please check it out when you can. Sahar, a 20-year-old girl back then. She visited the UAE for the first time. She had a group of friends and one of them was Ahmed. Ahmed today is married to Sahar, but back then they were very good friends. They were a big group of friends. One day, they all decided to visit Al-Qasimi Palace. It was around 9 p.m. when they decided to go. Now, back in 2004, the palace was way more dangerous to visit than it is now. The palace was recently opened for tourists after the religious cleansing was done. Sahar and her friends reached the palace. The caretaker at the palace did not allow them in at first. After minutes of trying, he agreed, and he told them that whatever happens inside is not his responsibility. And he told them to walk up the driveway and keep the cars outside. They started walking, and as they were walking towards the gate of the palace, Ahmed grabs Sahar's arm and he says, I don't think this is a good idea. They all agreed not to go inside and they cancelled the whole thing. Now put in mind, they are still outside. Sahar wanted some sort of memento, so she grabbed a stone from the driveway to keep it as a memory. As she picks up the stone, she heard giggles and her name being called from the roof of the palace. She immediately drops the stone and keeps walking. They all hopped in the car and she pointed at the house from a distance and she said, I thought you said there's no electricity here. Why is one of the lights turned on? As they all turned to look, the lights were already switched off. Ever since that night, Sahar was suffering every single night. Whatever she did outside that house, whoever she disturbed, and even though she did not go inside, she was the only one that was tortured by jinns for 6 years of her life. She would regularly wake up with scars and bruises on her body. She would have terrible nightmares, and she would be physically grabbed by unseen beings. All of this is because of her visit to that palace. In 2010, all of this has stopped. But just imagine what would have happened in 2004 if Sahar went inside the palace.